Welcome back to another episode of Geek Warning, everybody. I'm Caley Fretz. It's been a big week over here at the Escape Collective. If you know what I'm talking about, I'm bummed you missed it, first and foremost. I think you may be living under a small rock. We launched our big project this week about 24 hours ago. Actually, almost exactly 24 hours ago. And if you don't know what I'm on about, please go check out escapecollective.cc. That's us now. That is the new home of Geek Warning. It's the new home of Ronan and Dave and my man, James. Welcome back, James.
Hi, everybody. How do I do this again? It's been a while.
Sounding a little rusty there, James.
I am a little rusty because I actually can't remember the last time I recorded a podcast. It's maybe been like, I don't know, a couple months or something, maybe. I really don't know. I actually had to try and figure out where all my gear was.
Well, I would like to be the first to say that I literally could not be any happier about getting James on board. It was down to the last minute, but we figured it out. And so now you're on the pod. And you're gonna take a bit of a break here. We're not going to hear you for a couple of weeks, I think. But starting in April, James, you'll be escaping with us. You'll be an escapee.
And yeah, because in the meantime, I need a little bit of time to recover here. Because let's just say the last couple months have been a little stressful, and I'll just leave it at that.
Yes.
Did you manage to clean out your garage?
No, I did not.
Oh.
If anything, Dave, right now my garage looks worse than you have seen it before.
That's just stressful in itself.
I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to. It's a very sore subject.
We'll move on. Okay.
I'm going to send Dave a picture of my shed after this and just watch him melt, watch his hair catch on fire. All right. We have a fair amount to talk about today. We have some Shimano hub news. We have, SRAM Force. The updated SRAM Force was actually launched this morning, so we're going to talk a little bit about that. We have a court decision on some wavy wheels. We mentioned this in last week's episode. We've got a little bit more detail on the Cannondale Super 6 and that Lab 71 thing we were talking about. Of course, we've got a PSA. Of course, we've got an on your mind and over the head of your family. And I don't see a dirty, dirty Dave on here. But that's okay because we don't have any theme music yet. And
and I didn't love that segment. But hey, like I'm sure you'll keep bringing it up. But for now, we'll pass on that one today.
Unfortunately, this isn't up to Dave. The people have spoken, and the people are me. And so we are going to be continuing with Dirty Dirty Dave into perpetuity. All right, let's get right into it. First and foremost, Shimano has just queued up sealed bearing hubs. Dave, your name's next to this. Explain what's going on.
So it's actually part of a much larger release, which is Shimano Q's. And Shimano Q's is, according to Shimano, probably the biggest launch they've done in decades, and for decades to come, potentially, because this group set is likely to going to be seen over the next year or two. It's probably going to be accountable for 2 out of 5 bikes sold globally, which is quite the claim. And how they're claiming that is basically Shimano Q's is the replacement for all of Shimano's entry-level group sets. So if you look at the flat bar market or the entry-level mountain bike market, you traditionally had Altus, a Sierra, and a Livio as really any recreational level group set. Q's replaces those. On the road, while this hasn't been officially announced yet, it will eventually replace Claris, Sora, and Tiagra as well. And then it also replaces any trekking group sets. It replaces the entry-level stuff on e-bikes. So it's this all-encompassing group set that's now just very easy for a shop employee to explain to a new cyclist what they get for the money. And yeah, the different levels are basically just defined by how many speeds you get. So Shimano Q's is available in 9, 10, and 11 speed. And then Shimano's top end stuff is 12 speed. And that remains. So like your 105, your Ultegra, your Durace on the road, or your Dior through to XTR on mountain bike. If it's 12 speed, then that's still the higher end stuff. But yeah, amongst this, there's some huge stuff. One of which being the new hubs. Shimano's introducing some modular bearing kind of modular axle hubs where you can change the freehub body and change the axle size, which we've never seen from them before. And it's quite interesting because traditionally they've really beat the cup and cone drum.
Can I just say that I'm really, really sad about the whole cup and cone thing? Because as a longtime shop mechanic, I will acknowledge that cup and cone bearings can definitely go wrong if they are not properly adjusted, particularly when they're not properly adjusted from the factory, which is very often the case. But when they are properly adjusted, they are pretty much bulletproof. Like they far, far better durability than any sealed cartridge bearing I've ever seen. I can understand why Shimano went this route. It's just easier. It's just more consistent. Yeah. It's just, I mean, it'll be more consistently kind of okay as opposed to being potentially amazing. But
it's
unfortunately
also, the other big thing with all of this is that it's simpler from a product range point of view. So traditionally,
no, I mean, I get it. I'm still bummed though.
Yeah. So for a shop that stocks wheels, they no longer have to stock every single axle variant of that wheel. They can stock one and a couple of axle kits and keep whatever customer comes through the door rolling. Caley?
I mean, all of these sort of different things existed for a reason at some point, right? It's because they were sort of designed for a particular use case.
Yeah.
Is this basically because I guess the technology has progressed to the point where the thing designed for one use case can be pretty damn good for another use case, particularly at this sort of like lower level of stuff? I mean, you're talking about having stuff that's, you know, good for a hybrid and good for a road bike and good for whatever else. And
so there are still different series of group sets within the Q's range, and there's different tiers of it. And then there's also like 1x and 2x variants with different gearing ratios. So based on that, you'd have, there's stuff for touring bikes, like a 2x system for touring bikes, which, sorry, tourers that love 3x, there isn't that. But, and then there's, this 1x wide range, sort of like 11 to 50 tooth cassette for mountain bikes. So it really is just designed to be kind of modular where you can mix and match almost to suit the bike style.
Yeah, and that modularity is going to be absolutely huge for bike shops because Shimano has designed this so that all the parts are basically interchangeable with each other.
Yeah.
And that just means it just makes it so much easier in terms of stocking parts or having a part that will fit. I mean, even if you don't have necessarily like the exact right Q's model of rear derailleur or whatever on hand, the chances of you potentially having that a compatible Q's part on hand for someone that needs it is a lot better than it used to be.
Ronan?
That's even down to the chain, isn't it? Where it's the same chain across 9, 10, 11 speed.
Yep. So Shimano introduced this a little while ago. Link Glide is kind of what the system is, and they introduced it really for e-bikes where the cassette cog is actually quite a bit thicker than traditional. And they're claiming that cassettes last 3 times longer as a result of it. But yeah, basically they're using this technology across the board for Qs, and what that means is regardless of whether it's 9, 10, or 11 speed, they all use an 11 speed chain, a pre-existing 11 speed chain. And that also means they then have the same spacing on the chainring, so it's the same chainring regardless of what speed you have. But where this gets really interesting is that the spacing gaps of the cassette have traditionally changed with each generation, with each extra speed that Shimano has added. So say 9 and 10 speed were mostly incompatible because the gap in the cassette was different. So the amount the derailleur move based on the shifter was different between those two. Q's keeps that consistent. So 9, 10, and 11 speed, the gaps between the cassette are identical. It's just you get an extra cog onto the end for each extra speed you gain. And what that means is that your shifters are completely cross-compatible. So you can actually, in a pinch, if you had, say, a 11-speed Q's system and you broke a shifter and you went into a bike shop and all they had was a 9-speed shifter, you can put that 9-speed shifter on and just get 9 gears out of your 11-speed system, but keep riding. And that's pretty interesting, and that's not something that could be done before.
So basically, awesome. It's a limit screw then that determines
pretty much. Yeah, limit screw, and obviously, like, you know, the number of clicks in the shifter are going to determine how many clicks you get out of the shifter. But yeah, it goes the other way. You know, you could use in theory, you could use a 9-speed derailleur to run your 11-speed gears. So there's a huge amount of cross compatibility here. I guess the other things to know about it is that they're all using like a HD style cassette body. So that's just like your standard Shimano cassette body that everyone that's removed a cassette would probably know well. So this whole system is based on that, and that's kind of how Shimano is differentiating this between its high-end, say, mountain bike stuff. So all of its high-end mountain bike stuff is using that micro spline system, which allows a 10-tooth cog. Whereas basically moving forward, everything cheaper will just be HG, and that's really the big compatibility difference between these two. But yeah, it's exciting. Like, greater durability, easier part sourcing, you know, modular ability to mix and match parts. It's all sounding pretty good to me. But there is a big caveat here, and that is that it's not compatible with the pre-existing group sets. So if you think about the millions and millions of bikes out there in the wild that are running Sora or Tiagra or your Asira or Olivio, basically any, you know, the bikes that we first started on, the bikes that basically everyone first started on, that is probably still somewhere in a garage somewhere. Yeah, no compatibility, and eventually Shimano will stop making those parts. It's not going to happen soon. It'll probably be 5+ years, but eventually those bikes, if you did, say, break a derailleur on one of those bikes, there's a high chance that, at least if you want to stay in the Shimano ecosystem, you'd need to replace a shifter and a derailleur and a cassette and a chain ring. But it also, I think that'll eventually open the door to the likes of Microshift and all these other brands that do make replacement parts and compatible parts for these entry-level bikes. So I think the opportunity is that some of those brands will grow their market share.
How much information do we have on the cassette sprocket spacing? Like, do we know? Have we confirmed that 9-speed Qs is not the same spacing as 9-speed anything else Shimano historically?
Well, yes, because of we know it's based on the 11-speed chain width. So there's so I don't know exactly. There's got to be some speed within Shimano's range that will be close enough on the pull ratio where it will be compatible. But yeah, at the moment, Shimano is basically saying it's its own thing. And Link Glide is it's its own unique shifter pull ratio. But yeah, I haven't tested that. It will be interesting to find out because I'd be good to know whether you can link up, say, 10-speed road stuff or something like that, make it work.
Yeah, because I mean, historically, Shimano has always said that things either are or are not compatible, but their definition of compatible is like they determine things to be compatible if they're like actually designed for each other and work perfectly the way that they consider it to be.
Yeah,
but that doesn't necessarily mean that it won't work. They're like sort of off combinations, and people, of course, have done this forever. So the idea that some of these older parts might not be available for these other group sets moving forward, I mean, that's obviously concerning. But at least I think, we haven't seen any of the drop bar stuff yet, and we're still kind of speculating on that. But for the flat bar stuff, I kind of wonder how big of a deal that might be. Because again, the stuff that we're looking at is generally relatively inexpensive. So if someone did have to replace, well, again, we don't really know what the full compatibility is, but if someone had to replace a derailleur and a shifter as opposed to just a derailleur, it might not be that big of a financial impact depending on what is and actually is not compatible.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, in my mind, I'm seeing someone with a 9-speed Olivio bike breaking a derailleur in 10 years' time, and the solution there would be to replace basically the entire drivetrain, at least according to Shimano. So, but yeah, I guess we'll find out. Hey, like it's one of those things that I'm sure people will test as these parts become available, and the parts are starting to roll in. Like I think bikes with these components are due as early as June.
I love that we just spent like 15 minutes talking about the lowest end Shimano stuff. it makes me happy.
I actually really want to try
Makes me
it.
happy inside.
Like, I would love to get in
Yeah.
a bike with the stuff on there and check it out, because it probably
it's damn
is
good.
really good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, 11-speed
Yep.
chains are great. A lot of these derailleurs have like clutches in them for chain security. Yeah. I mean, it all looks fantastic. It's just, but yeah, we're talking about, because it is, it's Shimano's biggest release. It's 2 out of 5 bikes. 40% of the new bikes in the world are going to have Shimano Qs on it. That's a big deal.
Financially, this is probably the most important thing for Shimano in ages.
Oh yeah. Yep. So yeah, I mean, this is huge. This is basically anyone moving forward getting into cycling is going to experience this group set.
Speaking of huge,
Yeah.
Ronan.
Just before we move on, am I too close to the screen?
No, it's the segue.
I know. I got
What's up, Ronan? What's up?
Well, I was going to say, before we move on, we haven't really, we briefly touched on pricing there, but the pricing to me seemed pretty damn good on most of the stuff. I was finding myself multiple times checking, is this a whole group set or is this one part of the group set? And it was the whole group set pricing.
Yeah. That's a question I asked my contact at Shimano, and basically there's not any significant price rises associated with this group set. So it's very much designed to be in line with your Sierra and your Olivia equivalent. So yeah, in theory it shouldn't come with any more expensive bike prices. It's really intended to be a direct replacement. So that's good news.
The other thing we didn't mention was what actually Qs stands for.
Oh yes, what does it stand for?
Brace
That was
yourselves.
very cheesy.
Creating unique experiences. Cue the vomit.
Creating unique experiences.
Yes.
That's where the ES comes from?
Yes. The S comes from the N. Yes.
Which is
I take it
ironic,
back.
given that it's going to be across so many different bikes. It's not going to be really unique. It's going to be, or it is going to be.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
There's a reason why I didn't explain what the acronym meant. I was doing Shimano a favor there. But anyway, too late for that.
Well, that makes my little Q pun at the beginning of this even worse. Anyway, let's move on.
Yeah.
There are other things launched today, actually. These are maybe slightly less of a big deal. A kind of a big deal, but frankly, the changes are not enormous, right? So we've got updated SRAM Force. What are the sort of highlights here?
I guess I can field this one. The big highlights are like minor changes. So I think the number getting around is that they've made 20 minor changes, and some of those changes were actually trickled in throughout the previous generation of Force, is my understanding. So little tweaks to like the front derailleur cage to make it stiffer and easier to align. And little tweaks to the rear derailleur and tweaks to the cassette and things like that. And it's basically just the summary that I received was that it's the best bits of SRAM Red and the best bits of SRAM Rival, which is their newest generation group set in that sense, merged into one and made to look a lot more high end. So they've really pitched this that SRAM's not ashamed to say that it's really designed to compete with Ultegra DO2, and they really actually want to take their goal is to take basically market share away from Campagnolo for people building like desirable bikes. So they aesthetically, it's received some really big updates. It no longer looks plasticky and a little dull like the previous Force group. It actually does look quite classy. It's got a bit of a metallic holographic kind of graphic to it, and
It's
functionally
unicorn
wise,
grey,
it's
Dave.
Unicorn
Give
grey.
it- Yeah, that's technical.
I'm just going
terminology.
to go ahead and say that the previous Force group set, for as well as it actually worked, it looked absolutely terrible.
Yep.
Like it was just, I'm sorry, SRAM, but it was absolutely horrendous. So visually, it's not just a new finish and stuff like that, although that stuff certainly helps. That like before it was kind of just like this flat gray. But yeah, Dave, when you say that they're adopted these features from Red and Rival and stuff, and they adopted really good features. Well,
Yes.
arguably really good features from both of those, because like one of the ways, SRAM is saying that this group set's about 100 grams lighter or so, which sounds really good on paper. However, it's maybe a little bit less impressive when you realize that almost all that weight savings is coming from the new one-piece machined double road chainring, which is something borrowed from Red, which definitely looks way better. And I would say it seems to shift better because that whole thing is quite a bit stiffer. And then with the levers, I guess that's where the biggest rival influence comes in, because with the latest generation rival axis stuff, the lever bodies are quite a bit smaller, and you don't have that big hump at the top. So the lever bodies are the same as rival. It actually uses the same hood, but now it uses carbon fiber lever blades that the shape is a little bit different. You can kind of get more of your fingers around it, and like you're less likely to pinch your fingers when you're hitting the brakes. But to me, one of the biggest things that maybe doesn't get mentioned as much as it maybe should, from what I've seen in some other places, is that ever since SRAM introduced Axis, the way that you got remote buttons was to plug them into the levers, and now it's a wireless setup.
Yep, which was introduced with Rival, but it's so they have removed the ports in the shifter, basically the ability to run wired blips. That's no longer there, and that's a big reason why this new shifter body has been able to be slimmed down. That, and they've also ditched the contact point adjustment, which used to be that big 5mm bolt. If you pulled back the hood of your old Force or Red shifter, you'd see a contact point adjustment. They got rid of that. They just found out that most people didn't use it, and
no one used it.
Truthfully, it didn't make that much of a difference when you did use it. So, so that's where the bulk has been taken away, and I personally found that the most noticeable difference between new and old is in that shifter. I much prefer the new shape, that slimmer, more compact shape. My hands get along with it a lot better. I'm sure other people with medium-sized or smaller hands will also appreciate those changes. But yeah, there's other things, like they no longer have the option of 2 rear derailleurs that they previously had. There's now just there is still 2 rear derailleurs. They used to have the option of 3 rear derailleurs. Now there's 2. So you've got the 1 by derailleur and the Explore range, and then there's just 1 for SRAM Force Road, which covers everything from like a 26 tooth cassette, if you're foolish enough to use that, all the way through to like a 36, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, bigger chainring options, which was a demand from people that race road. So you can now get up to a 50 tooth big ring. There's a lot of nice little changes here, and overall, as James said, front shifting's better, ergonomics on the front's better. So there's a lot of nice little changes here. The big question I have is, has SRAM done enough compete with Shimano Ultegra Di2?
I guess it depends on what you're looking for from a group set, because I know I'm going to get a phone call from a certain someone at SRAM when I say this right now, but I still believe that Shimano shifting is faster, particularly in the back, than SRAM.
Suddenly smoother.
And that is something that I still feel like Ultegra has a leg up on for relative to this new Force group set, because functionally the group set hasn't really changed. But the thing is, a lot of people still prefer this shifting action of SRAM's ETAP setup. Just push the left paddle to go to an easier gear, push the right paddle to go to a harder gear. It's so much more intuitive. I actually reprogram my Shimano shifters to be as much like that as I can. But to me, far and away, even though these other changes are improvements, to me, far and away the biggest change is that it no longer looks like a plastic thing that you got out of a big box store. That's a massive.
I'd actually want to bike with this now. Yeah, Ronan.
That's a big change for me as well. Where previously, not previously, still do. I quite enjoy SRAM group sets, but previously, Red was really the only option for me if I was looking to build, a dream bike or a bike of my own. Aesthetics wise, Red was the only option. Or if you didn't want to go to that price point, which I wouldn't have wanted to, then you're forced to look at Ultegra. Whereas now, for me at least, the new Force group set is actually something that I would quite happily put on. Again, I'm speaking aesthetics wise here. Quite happily put on any bike. And there's one bike in particular, or one frame in particular, that I've been sort of trying to build up the components individually for, and was working towards a Red group set piece by piece. But now all of a sudden, this does actually open up a whole new option for me. So from that point of view, you know, in my discussions with SRAM, that was the box they wanted to tick, and they've done that.
Yeah. For me, like this is something I'll dive into a bit more with once we have a website up and running, escapecollective.cc, which I
sign up or we won't have a website.
Oh, okay.
By the way.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. If we get a website running, it's this is something I want to dive into, but the whole comparison between SRAM and Shimano. But for me, going back to James' point of being intuitive, I think that also extends onto like long-term ownership of the bike, because I actually still find Shimano a little bit more complicated. Like when you need to make, say, if you need to micro adjust the Di2, that's actually quite a bit more. It's more of a process, or even just charging the bike, having to plug it in and plug it in through the rear derailleur, and then keep the shifters in check. I actually find SRAM system of 2 separate batteries which run their own derailleur, and you can interchange them, and they're very easy to take out. I actually find that a better user experience. So yeah, I think there's quite a few things that SRAM does very well. The other thing that they are killing Shimano on at the moment is compatibility in its wireless protocol. So like the ability to grab these brand new 4 shifters that have improved ergonomics and run them on any other bike that has an Axis rear derailleur, whether that's a mountain bike, Eagle mountain bike, or whether that's a previous generation bike where you've got pre-existing force and you don't like the shifter ergonomics. That's pretty cool. And that's something that Shimano has traditionally failed at. They 11 to 12 speed change, for example, requires all new grip set effectively.
100% with you there, Dave. And the other thing you mentioned, ease of use and charging, and that the other thing that SRAM have announced today is the quad charger, which yes.
That's honestly, I'm most excited about that because it's a tool, but it's
I'm amazed
Old
it took
Grumpy
this
Hater
long.
is so excited.
Yeah.
Old Grumpy Hater is unbelievably excited about this.
Yes.
Our friend Zach Edwards is just like ecstatic.
Yes.
He's less excited about other things, but he's definitely excited about the charger.
Yeah.
Well, and one thing I confirmed with SRAM too, and I asked them about this when they showed this to us. I did confirm that they also made sure that the overall current delivered to those 4 batteries is basically the equivalent of taking 4 batteries and 4 separate chargers. So it's not like you're taking 4 batteries and drawing the same amount of electricity as you would before with a single charger and just conveniently charging 4 batteries at 1/4 the speed. So it is what you want it to be.
Yeah, it'll actually charge 2 batteries significantly faster, or it'll charge 4 batteries to 80% within 60 minutes.
Yeah, it's like a fast charger almost.
Yeah.
So USB-C plug, unlike USB micro before. And yeah, it's got little holes in the back so you can mount it on your wall, which is pretty cool. So yeah, that quad charger is something that SRAM will be selling aftermarket only. It won't come with any group set or anything like that. The group sets will still come with the individual charger like before, but I want one.
Have you got any SRAM bikes, Dave? SRAM equipment.
I do.
Bikes?
I own a hardtail.
So
mountain bike,
you don't have to buy a new bike then just to get this tool.
No. Okay. I might have to buy another one because my hardtail mountain bike has the dropper seat post and a rear derailleur that's Axis. So yeah, I might need to buy another bike so I have 4 batteries.
Oh
yeah.
Ronan, we should all know by now that Dave doesn't really buy one of any tool related thing.
Yeah. No, like in my possession at the moment, I think I have 3, 4 Axis bikes. So yeah, I could definitely use this charger.
We also know that
exciting.
You don't need to have a use for a tool to buy a tool. So
this is very true. The 12mm through axle taps in their original packaging in my garage is proof of this.
Dave, can we move on to the self promotion part of this?
Yeah.
This segment?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What am I self-promoting?
Can you're going to tell the people where they can find more and what they need to do to find more on the new SRAM stuff.
Oh yeah. Okay. So part of the SRAM stuff, I did attend a little bit of a launch. I've ridden it. I've photographed it, but we don't have a website yet to publish all this stuff on. And part of that launch is I actually sat down with Lachlan McKillop, who's sort of a technical training expert for SRAM, and we spoke through the group set for a good half an hour. And that conversation is not something I wanted to go to waste. So we are posting that conversation on our Discord channel, which is a members-only channel. And yeah, it's already a vibrant place 24 hours in. Caley?
It's an amazing place, actually. There's thousands of people on it already. Yeah, so if you sign up to be a member of Escape Collective, which, to reiterate, we need a lot of you to sign up right now, or else basically this thing doesn't happen. We're sort of in the launch phase from that perspective. If you sign up, one of the things you do get is you get access to this member-only Discord, and we're going to be dropping little nuggets in there on occasion. So this is a good example. We're gonna drop a bit of extra stuff that doesn't fit in today's podcast. We're gonna drop it in that Discord. We're also gonna be doing some live chats and things like that, maybe around racing, maybe around some tech stuff, all sorts of fun stuff we can do with the Discord. So one of the things you get if you sign up for Escape Collective, beyond just a very warm, fuzzy feeling inside and the promise of a high five next time you see any of us out and about.
So escapecollective.cc.
Go check it out.
Hey, when do I get my custom NFT?
No fucking NFTs.
A friend of mine asked for that. And actually what he asked for was, he said he demanded a high five, because that's what we promised, is a high five. And so I sent him a video of me high-fiving my phone. And I think we're going to turn that little GIF into an NFT and then send it to him one frame at a time. I think that's the plan.
Speaking of high fives, whenever we do get our merch site up and running here, one thing I am going to strongly suggest is Escape Collective big foam hands, so we can do like big foam hand high fives.
Ooh, yeah, we can bring a bunch to the Tour de France and just like lean out the window as we go up Alpe d'Huez and things. It's not going up Alpe d'Huez this year, but I think that's a great idea.
Recycle.
All right, we got more to talk about. We it'd be like compostable or something like that.
They make them out of cornstarch. I'm sure we can find one.
All right, good.
Yeah. We got things to talk about. We got a lot more to talk about. We're already halfway through this episode.
There's a new bike.
I'm not getting to the new bike yet. I'm getting to the end of actually ended up being quite short court battle between SRAM and Princeton Carbon. So Ronan, this is your beat. Well, how did this end up?
You say it was quite short, but it actually lasted the full 2 weeks it was predicted. But anyway, the story you're referring to is the SRAM versus Princeton CarbonWorks trial that had been ongoing over the past fortnight or so, and last Friday a jury ruled that actually Princeton CarbonWorks did not infringe on any patents, and as such they did rule in favor of Princeton, and Princeton can continue making were they the peaks or were they the waves? I can't remember, but they can keep making the rims with the bulges. And the trial with the humpback whales has not yet come up, but I think that will happen next. And they definitely have a strong case here, given that pretty much everybody has referenced to humpback at some point. So
I hear the whales are having trouble getting good representation, getting good legal representation. So that's still kind of pending.
I thought there was a terrible pun coming there, James.
No, I don't. I don't do the terrible puns. I'm not nearly that clever. Not nearly that clever.
Well, I think we mentioned this last time. None of us here are lawyers, and so I don't think we're not gonna apply any opinion to the actual opinion here. We're not gonna to the outcome, other than to say that, I mean, it's clear, like Princeton dodged a financial bullet, right? There's no question about that. This was a lot of money for them. And I can't imagine that SRAM is all that happy about it. I don't really know what else we can add to this.
Not a whole lot, I don't think. I mean, SRAM for sure is not happy about this. I did speak to someone at Princeton Carbon last week, and I can confirm that they are very happy.
Yeah, I think it does set a precedent for potentially other people looking at this design now as well, right? Like that's very true. Like if I was SRAM, I'd be going to Katsanis being like,
do we need to license this from you anymore? Can we just make it a bulge instead of a peak or whatever the heck it was? I mean, it does have maybe sort of implications down the line for that particular, or designs like that, right? Not fitting the exact same thing, but because correct me if I'm wrong here, but part of, I mean, Ronan, you mentioned this when we were talking about it. Part of the argument was that SRAM's definition of their patent was too broad, right? And so if this case effectively narrows that definition to the way that Princeton saw it, then yeah, that could have impacts. But we're getting into the realm of lawyers, and like I said, none of us are. So I want to move us on to the new bicycle. What do we got, Dave? James. Should we got James in this one?
Yeah, sure.
Sure.
All of you.
I guess seeing as how I've actually written this thing. So Cannondale introduced a new Super 6 Evo 4th gen at this point, and they are, of course, calling it, quote, our fastest lightweight bike ever, unquote. Pretty heady claims on this thing. They're saying that it is an 11-watt aero improvement over the 3rd gen Super 6 Evo, of course, at 45k an hour. They're also saying that it's more aero than a Tarmac SL7 or a Trek Amanda SLR by pretty decent margins. Yeah, so it's also quite a bit lighter than it used to be. The top end frame is now just 770 grams for a painted 56 centimeter frame with hardware. It's pretty good. There's also going to be a couple of other tiers. There'll be an 810 gram high mod version. They'll also have a 930 gram just a Super 6 Evo carbon. But yeah, quite light. But one of the coolest things about all this thing is that it really, I mean, first of all, I think it's a great looking bike. It's super clean, very, very tidy design. But they also got rid of nearly all of the weirdness that Cannondale is often known for. It's a threaded bottom bracket. It's a conventional 1.125 to 1.5 drop-in integrated headset, for example. It is still fully internally routed, and it does use a non-round steer tube. It's kind of almost like a pizza slice shaped steer tube. They're calling it Delta. But there's a bunch of stuff about the routing that I have to admit I don't entirely hate. Like, I'm obviously still not a fan of lines that run through headset bearings, but they at least seem to have made it a little bit easier. There's a decent amount of space to run all this stuff. They have reinforced the surface of the steer tube with Integra fibers to protect from wear. I mean, they're saying that in any of their testing, wear hasn't been an issue, but they're basically saying that even if it is, just in case, they're just kind of playing it safe there, which I like to see. And then there's an awful lot of compatibility with a whole bunch of different stems and one-piece cockpits and that sort of thing. They have their own one-piece carbon bar and stem that they developed with Momo Design, people who are often famous for like car steering wheels, that sort of thing. But then they also have one-piece setups. But they also have two-piece setups. It's also compatible with regular round 1.125 steer tube stems. So there's a whole bunch of different like headset covers and stuff like that. And actually, like, they look pretty good. Like, I give them a lot of credit for having that much flexibility in the routing setup without it looking terrible.
So many questions for you, James, given you've ridden this bike and I like what I see with this bike. But I want to start, first of all, is there anything we should be concerned about with the like what I've seen of the steer tube in pictures? It looks like a triangular shape, which has never really been done before. Should we have any concerns about that, or is that just another shape?
There's been weight added to the steer tube versus previous designs, and I know they're very confident in the strength of this one, but my concern is actually related to ride quality, and that was actually something I didn't quite get an answer to. Is they talk about the compliance of this frame and the ride quality of this frame being effectively unchanged despite having now like a deeper section aero seat post. But all of that talk is in relation to seated comfort, and there wasn't much anything really to say about the front end comfort. And a triangle is just naturally going to be stiffer than other shapes. So I don't know, James, did you feel anything like more harshness to the front end at all, or anything like that?
I would say not so far, because I think for the reality is for a lot of aero road bikes in particular, if you kind of go on the assumption that someone riding that bike would be running a fairly lower front end, which is kind of just how a lot of these bikes are designed, there's just not that much steer tube available to bend anyway. And like we see a perfect example of this, how Trek kind of got rid of that front ISO-speed setup in their latest generation Domani SLR. I mean, they admitted that there's just not that much to gain from a flexible steer tube.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some, but not a ton. But I wouldn't say that I have noticed.
It's cheaper just to run your headset loose, right?
Yeah. But I wouldn't say I've noticed that the front end is particularly harsh right now. I mean, it's hard to say with like different stems and handlebars and that stuff, that sort of thing. But I definitely wouldn't say that the front end seems particularly harsh at all. I actually think the ride quality actually seems really quite nice. I mean, it's a really nice riding bike. It feels really nice and kind of cohesive front to back. It doesn't feel like sort of like, two halves of a bike stuck together. It's what you'd expect when you put a lot of power down. It's very kind of like pleasingly stiff. It doesn't feel like outrageously stiff, but it definitely is up there. But that's not really a huge competing feature among most bikes anyway, because really high end bikes, as far as stiffness goes, they're mostly the same or very similar, at least anyway.
Speaking of the ride, is the geometry still the same as previous Super 6, just identical copy and paste?
In a lot of ways, it is. So they retained the steering geometry. So basically, like the trail and fork rakes and stuff like that. It's basically unchanged. Stack and reach is basically unchanged. They did change a little bit in terms of the sizing. They got rid of the biggest size 60 and 62 centimeter, and they switched it to just a 61 that supposedly handles both. But in terms of the geometry, it's basically the same as the third generation one.
Yeah, I think there's also been quite a lot of attention paid to the smallest sizes, really tweaking and refining the geometry on those as well.
My main question now, was it a Lab 71 that you rode?
Yeah, so I did not ride a Lab 71. They're like super high end version now. I think I was on. What was I on? I think I was on like a high mod with Force. I think. I can't remember now, but yeah, so I definitely was not on a super high end one, and I actually kind of like that I think given the choice, I think for a long term I would almost be more inclined to just do like a regular high mod or even just like a base level carbon one, because they're all pretty reasonably light.
Yeah, the thing that sort of jumped off the sheet to me in looking at the claimed weights that were published earlier today, and I'm putting all these questions to you because you have seen the bike, whereas I haven't. But there's only 40 grams of difference between a Lab 71 and a high mod.
Yeah.
Is there something else I'm missing?
Well, no, but from a percentage point of view, that's what, it's probably 5% or something less weight. So, I mean, once you're flying that close to the sun, there's only so much you can do without.
Yeah, the other thing is the Lab 71 has a pretty unique finish on it. There's like a big exposed section of top tube where there's just sort of like clear coat on there, and the finish is sort of like this chopped carbon fiber stuff. So like that chopped carbon fiber top layer it's mostly cosmetic, as a lot of them are. But it does look really cool, particularly since if you go with that Momo one piece carbon front end, the finish on that is actually the same. So it visually is pretty neat. Like it does look premium.
Yeah. So it was explained to me with the Lab 71, like there's obviously going to be a big price difference there for, as you say, Ronan, like not a huge physical difference. Like the weight's really the only thing you're gaining, and maybe a little bit of a cosmetic difference. But it comes down to how these are manufactured. And basically the Lab 71's using such a high grade of prepreg carbon that they're basically saying is the shelf life of it is almost non-existent. So they just have to use this stuff up. They can't keep it in the freezer or in the fridge for an extended period of time because the resin goes bad. So they have to like basically get the prepreg in and use it immediately. Whereas other carbons you can kind of keep on ice for a little bit. So that's where the inherent cost is just having the logistics of it, and just really it's a very expensive material and difficult to work with.
I've always really liked the idea of using some super high end grade of carbon, chuck caution to the wind, regardless of what it costs. Let's just do this thing.
Yeah.
But I always thought there'd be a bigger benefit than 40 gram saving.
Yeah. I mean,
like Dave said, and we're definitely in the realm of diminishing returns. And if we if you want to go back in time, it really wasn't that long ago where, an 800 gram frame was pretty remarkable. But the big thing that we have to remember here is we are talking about an aero frame too, and those things are just inherently heavier.
Yeah, like I remember the Look 585 was the first 1,000 gram frame, and that was just unthinkable. So we've come quite a way.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, overall, I think this looks really good. I think Cannondale does seem to be on a really good path with this stuff. Like I said, like it's a good looking bike. They seem to have hit all the performance targets. There's nothing super weird on it at all. I mean, it does use its own seat post, but that's not unusual at all. I mean, there's a lot on here that I like. Obviously, it's expensive. I don't have the pricing on hand right away, but I think this will be good for them personally. And I guess for shop people, and especially people who have maybe dealt with warranty stuff, they did also get rid of the steerer stop up front that they used to have with their old routing setup, because they used to have sort of like this double walled headset, or they used to have this sort of double walled head tube within a head tube thing for their internal cable routing. So while that setup was nice because it was a lot easier to service, like it didn't go through the headset bearings, it was a little bit more problematic because they did have a hard steerer stop in there that apparently was somewhat prone to breaking. So that's no longer an issue.
Yeah. Pricing I don't have for the lower level models, but for Lab 71, $15,000 US for the complete bike. That is as the most expensive as these bikes get, and then the high mods below that are quite significantly less. But what's worth noting is that bike is arguably almost unupgradable. So, like for example, it comes stock with like a ceramic speed bottom bracket. They even give you the aluminium socket from Ceramic Speed for that bike, which is quite an expensive tool. And then like it's got this crazy like 3D. I think it's a 3D printed physique saddle, a new model. If it's not 3D printed, either way, the material makeup of that saddle makes it a very expensive saddle.
It is a 3D printed model.
It is a 3D printed. Okay,
yeah, it's one of their adaptive ones for sure.
Yeah, complete frame set with like handlebar, stem, and all that. $6,000 in the Lab 71. So yeah, I mean it's in line with, as we've previously said, Lab 71 is kind of Cannondale's answer to S-Works, and it's certainly in line with that.
I've seen prices quoted somewhere earlier. The previous generation high mod was 11,500 sterling, and the new high mod is 10,500 sterling. So that looks like a saving, but actually the new top of the range, which is obviously Lab 71 now, is 12,500. So depending on what way you want to look at that, it's pricing's going just whatever direction you want to choose.
Yeah, fair enough.
It's going in every single direction at the same time.
The other, just before we move on from the Cannondale, the two things we haven't mentioned is aero water bottles.
It does have aero water bottles. It's funny because when I was getting the whole spiel on this thing from Cannondale, two things popped in my head. They actually did call out specifically, Dave, that they knew that you'd be very excited that it came with a tool.
Mm-hmm.
So they were thinking of
correct.
You. They were thinking of you.
I like that they know us.
Yeah, and then when they showed these bottles, I immediately thought of Ronan. So these bottles and cages that come with not all of the bikes, but I think most of the models, at least the higher end ones. It's a custom water bottle and water bottle cage, and it's sort of like if you took a round water bottle and sort of just like shaved off the sides to just kind of make them narrower. So it is an aero water bottle in the sense that the width is not really much wider at all than the width of the tubes on the frame. But it's still normal. And if I remember correctly, I think they said that the cages will also fit conventional round bottles.
Yeah. So the cages are basically holding a round shape front to back, and then the cage is like non-existent side to side, like the bottle. So the bottle's sides are shaved. Any round bottle fits, and then likewise, those aero bottles actually retain a round lid as well. So it's an interchangeable lid with other bottles.
And supposedly the bike tests faster with the bottles in place.
Mm-hmm. Correct. Yes. Yeah.
The one other thing we haven't touched on is just the fact that there is now a whole new aftermarket for boy racers who want to tune their Cannondales with Momo accessories. Momo exhaust, Momo seatbelts, Momo handlebars. You can get a Momo fire extinguisher somewhere if you want. You can get a NOS button. The whole works.
And because it's a thread bottom bracket, you can just thread those accessories straight in.
Ooh.
Yeah. No longer.
That was the nerdiest joke I think we maybe ever had in this podcast. In its long history of like 3 episodes.
The geekiest joke, Caley. The geekiest joke.
The geekiest. I feel it's time to move on.
Yeah,
that was.
let's do it.
I really like the sound of this bike though, and I really like the look of this bike, and I think that while we here are geeks and we pay very close attention to some of the details of these things, the fact that it looks good is going to be a good news for Cannondale and its sales figures, I would imagine.
Yeah. I
want to know though, Dave, what is currently on your mind and over the head of your family?
Not much other than writing for a website that may or may not happen in the future, depending on how signups go. I'm deep in a rabbit hole of cutting carbon fiber. The correct tools, the correct process, whether you finish it with close off the cut or not, whether you attack it with a bladed saw or a grit saw. I'm breathing in all the dust. I'm just getting it all, and that's where my mind is, and I haven't been able to tell anyone about that until now. So thanks, Caley.
Dave, I'm curious. When you cut carbon fiber stuff, regardless of what kind of tool you use to cut it, do you spray it down first to cut down on the dust? Because I do.
Absolutely do. Yeah. So I've got a little bottle of water in a cheap spray bottle, which I use, and then use a N95 mask and keep the dust settled as much as possible. There are other techniques that you can do, which I will cover in writing if enough of you sign up to read so.
So we should expect like what is this going to be, like a 500-800 word thing?
Yeah, my usual keep it brief. I don't like to make things any longer than what else is already on the internet. That's my approach to this kind of thing. So just expect a quick 1 to 2 minute read, I would say.
Gotcha. Dave, you do realize that you're not paid by the word, right?
Which is why I keep it just, like everything I've done in the past is 500 words or less.
Dave, are you fielding questions on this topic now, or do we have to wait for the article?
No, I mean we can field questions, and then I can make sure that I'm answering it in the piece.
One question I've always had is like, could you use and correct? Forgive me if my terminology is not correct, but like a circular saw, like a No, okay.
No, you can. And that's I've been chatting with Ruckus Components, for example, who are a carbon fiber repair specialist, and that's kind of what they use. They have a diamond bladed saw that they'd use with dust extraction and all the fancy a wet saw.
It's almost like a tile saw.
Yeah, basically, and that's exactly what they would use to inspect components for aerospace use and that sort of thing. So you can. The question is why?
Well, it was actually it was one of those, the build videos that we see on YouTube. I think it was Road Bike Channel or one of those. They were in the Bahrain Victorious head service course, I think, and obviously mechanics building countless bikes at the start of the season. If they could cut down time cutting steerer tubes, I'm sure that would be helpful. And I'm pretty sure it was that video. It could have been one of the other ones, but definitely on that channel, I seen they were using a circular saw, and I'm no expert mechanic, but there are certainly practices that I see in some of those videos that I think that's maybe not the way it should be done. So that was why I wanted to double check. I think it's workable. A good idea or not?
I think a circular saw a circular saw is kind of like a handheld tool that you run down. So I'm imagining it's more a drop saw that you saw, where they have a handle that you pull the saw blade down onto the product.
It's about 2 years ago now, so I can't quite remember.
But that stuff works. Like there's ones that sort of have liquid built into them that keep the blade cool, and that liquid would also keep the dust at bay. Probably work, but a one that you pick up from your hardware store designed for wood I wouldn't do, because you'll probably just spit a lot of dust into the air.
I want to just correct myself there now. It sounded like I was dishing some of the mechanics, and I was in no way doing that whatsoever.
I would also say, like, truthfully, some of the stuff you see at the World Tour shouldn't be replicated by a shop or an individual. Like, they really do some stuff that is fine for professional use, knowing that product might be crashed out in the next week, and that's the end of its life cycle. But if you're building a bike that you've paid good money for yourself, then there's often better but perhaps less efficient ways of doing things.
I'm hung up on your admission that your spray bottle is cheap.
I actually have some very, very expensive spray bottles. I think the most expensive one I've got is like
here because
$80.
I have like a glass nice spray bottle.
But what happens when you drop that?
This is for spritzing my plants, so I probably won't, because I live in a very dry place and sometimes they need a little bath.
Yeah.
This is for spritzing my plants, but I just, if I was going to have a nicer tool, in addition to my hammer, if I was going to have a nicer tool than Dave Rome, I need to know about it. So you're saying that's not the case, and you actually do have some quite expensive spray bottles.
There are some really nice spray bottles that like double spray on one pull of the trigger. I actually don't like that, so I've reverted back for the water spritzer. I've reverted back to just a supermarket buy. But I have customized. I put speed holes in it, so it's lighter.
Petroleum.
Dave, I just want to say that I can't wait for the day when and if you have a kid, and I'm just going to enjoy watching you be just completely paralyzed with like analysis paralysis on everything. Yeah.
So I once worked in SEO for a baby goods website. So yeah, I know enough to know that I don't want to have to think about that industry. Anyway, that's completely unrelated to a cycling nerd podcast. But
gentlemen, we're close to an hour of podcasting.
What else is on everyone else's
minds? Some other things to cover. Yeah. James, do you have anything? Is there anything sitting on your mind at the moment?
Well, yeah. I mean, if I am understanding correctly, I mean, we do a regular PSA, don't we?
Well, that's a different segment.
We could combine segments.
Sure.
No, we could combine segments. Sure. Maybe the PSA is on James's mind.
Am I breaking protocol here?
Absolutely.
We don't have protocol.
I would just like to remind everyone who is running disc brakes out there, particularly hydraulic disc brakes, to actually check the thickness of your disc brake pads, because with basically every modern fully hydraulic disc brake setup out there, it automatically compensates for disc pad wear until those disc brake pads are overly worn. And a lot of people will be like, oh, like my lever is starting to feel a little spongy, I must have to bleed it. It may or may not be the case that you have to bleed it, but it may also be the case that your pads are just really, really worn. And as your pistons extend too far out of the calipers, then that's a good indication that you might want to check those, because once they get too worn, that's a kind of a problem.
James, got any tips for what people should be paying attention to as warning signs as their disc brake pads are screaming for help?
Yeah, well, like I said, the like a softening brake lever, like I said, could be the sign of a bleed issue, but it could also just be that the calipers are starting to sort of take up too much fluid out of the master cylinder reservoir in the lever. And then the other thing is, I mean, I know every manufacturer has specific guidelines as far as what the pad material thickness is supposed to be and that sort of thing. But I generally just kind of go with a rough visual check. For me, if I look at the caliper and the amount of pad material is roughly about half the thickness of the backing plate, then I usually consider those pads to be close to done.
Yeah. For me, there's a few things that I would tell riders is that, like, some of the systems like Shimano, for example, often starts to get a bit noisy as the pad gets worn. As it comes to the end of its life, it kind of almost can screech a little bit, and that can be a very good warning sign. You also tend to experience a bit more rub from the brake as those pistons get fully extended. They don't quite retract the same way. That's stuff I've seen. And then I would also just say, like, if you sight through the caliper, you've got the brake pads have a spring in between them. If your pad material is getting anywhere near the thickness of just that spring, you're well overdue.
So anyway,
it's a good PSA.
Check your disc brake pads, please, everyone.
I'm gonna go check my disc brake pads. I need to get all my bikes working after a pretty heavy winter of snow. It's about time. I'm gonna FaceTime Dave while I go into my shed and dig through my bucket of tools and put everything back together.
My hairline's already receding, Caley. I don't need this kind of stress.
that is actually one thing that you get. We haven't advertised this. That is one thing that you get with a membership to Escape Collective. You do get 24/7 access to Dave. He is your virtual bicycle mechanic consultant.
That's true.
All the time. He will be available 24/7, 365. You can get him on a Zoom call or a Google Hangout or whatever is most convenient for you, and he will talk you through every single aspect of your bicycle repair.
Caley, can we renegotiate my contract?
We're just gonna post a mobile phone number, just on the Discord, and then then you're good to go. Just give him a ring whenever you want.
Done.
Pay no attention to time zones and what sort of whatever time it is for Dave. All right, everybody.
This sounds fun.
It is time for us to wrap up for the week.
Did Ronan have a?
I might.
Ronan, do you have?
No, and I might actually just throw it in here because it's actually a question for Dave, and it's tool related. So, and it might
We're
be
gonna
useful.
have to tack on another 20 minutes here.
I was doing a spring clean of the garage, and I realized just how many of the hex keys that you get delivered with different products free that I have lying around that I don't want to dump because that feels irresponsible, but I don't want to use because they feel shite. So I want to know what I should do with them.
The quality's low enough that you'll probably damage whatever bolt you put them in. So I would say next time if you're ever visiting a scrap metal yard, just chuck them in the.
Oh man, that's so harsh. I take all that stuff and I donate it to my local community cycles place because I will agree that those tools are generally not very good. But I would argue that tools that are maybe not very good are still better than no tools at all. And a lot of those places are hurting for stuff, period. So if it's, if you have like even some sort of decent quality 4, 5, 6 mil, and that would include anything that I would, by Dave's standards, decent quality would be anything like, $50 each and up. But
not quite. It's just more than a free Allen key that came with your Billy bookcase is decent quality to me.
The products that these free Allen keys came with cost less than $50.
Yeah.
I mean, if they're truly, truly horrible, then it's probably not worth handing out to someone. But there's a lot of kind of freebie stuff that is at least halfway decent that would at least be useful to someone who doesn't have anything. I donate all that stuff.
You can send them to me. I'll use happily. So
Caley actually has like a hex key holder that just has all 4 millimeters from IKEA. It's just like he treats it like a Pez dispenser. He just uses one, throws it behind him, grabs the next one, never without a 4 mil.
But I have. I can't defend myself because it's too close to truth. All right, so I'm wrapping it up. As a reminder, we didn't use this episode to make a hard pitch to you all because you still want good content, and we don't want to do that. So this is the only bit you're going to get, which is we just founded a new cycling media empire. It's called escapecollective.cc. We are currently in the membership gathering phase, and to be very blunt about it, like this is how we get our capital for launching off the ground, right? So when Dave says that this potentially doesn't exist, that's an accurate statement. If we don't get enough members, this won't happen. And so this is our sort of hard pitch and plea to you, which is if you like this podcast and you like the people on this podcast and you like the people on the placeholders and you like the people that are on the splash page of escapecollective.cc, then please sign up. It means a huge amount to us, and we'll thank you forever, and you'll get a big high five next time we see you.
And access to a 30-minute interview about new SRAM Force.
and you're going to get like genuinely pretty cool little tidbits. Like there's going to be lots of stuff on that front where we, it's not necessarily, it's not scraps. It's like bits that don't fit somewhere else or stuff we go out and specifically get for that purpose to just provide a little bit of extra insight, even deeper, basically for members only. Anyway, that's enough of a pitch. I don't want to sit in your ears for too long here. So head over to escapecollective.cc, sign up. Thank you very much. And we'll be back next week. I think James is off for a couple weeks, but the rest of us will be back next week with another episode of Geek Warning. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.